And if you've ever raced like the Calaggy Criterium in January, it's the exact same course as that one. So at the start of the race, around 15 minutes before the race, I had done some warm-ups with my two teammates, Nolan and Lars, and as we found out later, I'd have a fourth teammate, but we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, no, so I was feeling pretty good at the start of the race, and right here in front of me, in this navy blue and orange striped jersey, you can see my other teammate, Ryan, who is also a DBC racer and is really, really strong. He's led a ton of solo breakaways that have gone to the line, and he's gotten podiums in this manner. The other big team is this rider on the left in this grayish white jersey. It's Enjoy Cycling Club out of Sacramento. They also had 3 or 4 riders today in this race. So we'll just go through a lap of this circuit. So we're on this first back straightaway right now, and this is actually a false flat as you get closer and closer to that top set of corners. So I'd say it's probably about 1%, which makes it really hard because the field is already slowing down into that top set of corners over there, and people are trying to move up into positions to get themselves an ideal line into that cornering complex. So this last bit right before this turn that we're making right here is usually quite a bit of a power run. But on the first lap, everyone was taking it easy. We didn't really know what the grip was going to be like in the corners. And yeah, there you go. I mean, you can see it right there. The people have no idea what the grip is like. Everyone's avoiding the paint as much as they can. Nobody's cornering really hard. We're just trying to stay upright, keep the rubber side down, which was honestly harder than expected in this race. Thankfully, though, we managed to make it through the first lap without any serious repercussions, and I think that helped everyone's confidence. But about now, it starts actually coming down pretty hard. And you can see the rain sort of coming down in front of us, in front of the GoPro, but it's coming down quite hard at this point. Jerseys are soaked, and the road, I don't know if you can see it, but it looks almost oil slicky. It's quite loose, and on the right you can see a rider from Reno, Devo, going up the inside, and his team would actually be the one, not to spoil anything, but the one to take the win today in a solo breakaway, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, we've come through the main cornering complex at the top, and we're coming down the final straight, and we should see the finish line in the reg tent briefly. And yep, there you go. You can see the finish line tent right at that white tent on the side. And that's a lap. The officials did something really funny on race day where they used powder or sand to denote the finish line, which wound up becoming a problem later on in the race. So let's just go over my role today pretty quickly. I mean, it was about this point that I realized I had good legs, but I didn't have I'm going to win legs, and I knew that pretty quickly after the first lap because you can already see my heart rate is going crazy. The issue is because in the rain, if you're drafting behind someone, a lot of mud and sand grime will get kicked up into your face, and that sand grime at the finish line was an example of that. So I was getting a ton of sand kicked up into my mouth, and my heart rate and power were suffering as a result of that because I just wasn't able to comfortably sit in the draft. So you can see I'm doing 300, 270 watts. Now I'm a smaller rider. I'm only 55 kilos, and my threshold for me is 260 watts. So sitting at 300 watts for the entire back straight it's very uncomfortable for me. I've made it through criteriums on this race course before at this category level, but never in the rain, and I think the rain had a large part to do with what goes on later on in the race. It's hard to maintain that draft when you can't see or breathe without some level of discomfort. But yeah, you can see again, coming out of this corner complex at the top, I'm having to spike all the way up to 450 watts. This is an uncomfortable effort. And coming around the right side, you can see my teammate, Nolan. Nolan won the Cat 5 race the last time anyone raced here at Calaggy in January. This is the Cat 4s now. He's a talented runner that's just made the jump from running to cycling. He's only been riding for a few months, but he's got the aerobic fitness, so for him sitting at like stupidly high heart rates like 170, 180 BPM for half an hour to an hour it's no problem. But yeah, again, coming out of this final corner, you can see it's like every single corner I'm having to punch it up to like stupid power and do like nearly like low-level sprint efforts just to stay on wheels. And even coming down the straights, you can see I'm sitting at above 300 watts. If threshold's 260, that this is just an unsustainable effort. So yeah. And it's around this point that I started noticing that these two riders who I'm sitting on right now, they're not quite holding the wheel of the main group in front of us. And I don't realize it until it's a little bit too late. So I look to see if Nolan's on my wheel. He was. And I decided to spike it up as hard as I can to try to stitch it up and get Nolan back to the front group. Because at this point I knew I didn't have the legs to win, but Nolan seemed like he was doing pretty good. He said he felt good. So I figured, okay, maybe he might have the legs to win. Let me try to prevent him from having to make this effort to stitch it up. And there you go. Yeah, you see Nolan coming out of my draft and finding a wheel to sit on now. But at this point, I mean, you can see what's happening here. It's like my job as a smaller rider today, I don't have a sprint to win. I don't have the peak power to be taking pulls or trying to make a breakaway work. So I'm just going to try to sit in at this point, and you can see my other teammate today from UCD, Lars, on the left in this white and blue jersey coming across into the center of the screen. But it was pretty clear at this point in the day that my job today was going to be making sure that Nolan and Lars didn't get dropped by the group, and to make sure that no breakaways go away, because at this point today, like most teams that were at this race had 2, maybe 3 riders. We at DBC or Davis Bike Club, were the biggest team today in this race, solely due to the fact that we had 4 riders. And as a result of that, the onus is on us to do the chasing if there's a breakaway. So I figured my job would be to just make sure that no breakaways get enough breathing room to actually like stay away unless they have a rider from our team on it, and to also make sure that if something happens like a wheel that Nolan, Lars, or Ryan are following gets dropped, making sure that they have a draft to help them conserve their energy as they make it back into the group. So we're going to jump ahead just a little bit, and yeah, so this is about a lap later, and we're coming down the back straight, and I don't know if you can notice, but it's coming down much, much heavier now. At this point, the cornering surface it's quite bad. It's almost to the point where like you lean it over and you are genuinely scared that you're going to slip out, because the tarmac here is really smooth, which is nice in the dry, but the result of that is that once it starts raining, it gets very slippery, and as this happens, like people's ability to corner and brake more gets more and more devolved, for lack of a better word, and the result of this is that it's way more surge coming both in and out of the corners. And the result of this is that it's just a lot harder to stay on the wheel. But I see Nolan motion to me that he's going up and for me to sit on his wheel. I'm a little confused, but then I see what he's doing. I see a breakaway going off in the distance, and it's at this point that Nolan realizes that our boy Ryan is sitting at the front of this. I hadn't realized this at this point. I realized it a little bit after we crossed the line, and around now I tell him, sit back, it's Ryan off the front. And both of us decide we're going to sit back and try to more or less hold up the field and block the field from chasing and disrupt any chase efforts we can to try to let Ryan get a gap. But almost immediately the breakaway with Ryan in it devolves, and nobody's working with him, so he's brought back almost instantly. By the time we're halfway down the next straight, the breakaway is back and people are already coming around us to reform the group. So at this point I figure, okay, you can see my heart rate is spiked up to 180 BPM. That's pretty high, so I figure, okay, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to roll back, let some wheels go forward, and just try to find a wheel to sit on through the next straight, try to see if I can get my heart rate to come down. It's already come down to 170, but that's not very far down. But yeah, the issue here, and you'll see this now, is once you get to the top braking area, right after this corner over here, it's very slow and tentative, and people were making some very odd line choices. At this point, actually, my rear brake locked up, so I went deep. So I had to take a really bad line coming out of that. Had to spike my power up really high just to stay on the wheels. But this rider in the blue Cannondale on the left side of the screen and the black jersey, he'll become important a little bit later in today's race. But this entire situation has me having to surge up and down. I'm the kind of rider that can hold at threshold for an hour, but I can't do the surginess very well. So I'm going to try to make up some wheels, try to find Nolan, try to find Lars, see if anyone I know is there, try to see if I can help move them into better position. But around this point, this happens, and I get elbowed into the gutter, which was a very odd experience and a very scary experience. I was hoping to avoid this kind of situation ever in racing, but, it's bike racing, that's going to happen at some point. But this rider on the pink bike accidentally elbowed me into the gutter, and that made my corner entry line really, really poor. Meant I had to surge out of the corner again really hard. And I see this rider in the blue Cannondale going off the front. I'm like, okay, I've raced against him before. I don't actually know his name. If you see this, please come into the comments. But I see him going off the front, and I know he's a really strong rider. And you can see how fast he's making this gap. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Is he bridging up to someone? Is he trying to make a solo breakaway? And I see two riders off in the distance, and I realize that this is a breakaway. But there's an issue here. Around the time we crossed the start-finish line, the rider on the blue Cannondale, his wheel kicked up a bunch of sand right into my left eye. So I'm riding right now at this point in time with my left eye shut, and I realize, okay, my legs are not doing great right now. My heart rate's not feeling good. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do my best to bring this breakaway back, sit as high as I can with the power, and just try to bring it back for Nolan, Ryan, and Lars, and then I'm going to pull off. I'll see if I can recover, but we'll do what we can. This is what I've got in the tank for today. So I said just as hard as I can. I think the effort wound up being just under a minute and 40 seconds at 300 watts, or 330 watts normalized, which, and there you can see Ryan going off past as they brought the breakaway back. But yeah, no, it wound up being more or less a minute and a half at 6 watts per kilo normalized, which was a really, really hard effort for me. So at this point, I'm toast. My legs are toast. They feel like they are stiff. They're made of rocks, and I have nothing left. And you can see I'm still having to spike it through this corner complex because I have no wheel to follow. So I'm doing my best just to try to find a wheel, but I just can't seem to get on anyone's wheel. And at this point, I pretty much realize, okay, I'm kind of screwed here because I can't seem to hold anyone's wheel. I'm having to do 450, 460 just to hold on, and I can't seem to get onto this rider in front of me, his wheel. I can't seem to get onto his wheel. And the result is that throughout the entire next straight, I'm sitting well above threshold, having just taken a massive pull. And you can see my heart rate reflects that. I'm doing 100 RPM. I'm just under 180 beats per minute. My legs have nothing more to give, and you can see them pulling away. I figured, generally my strength is in the cornering, so I figured maybe I'd try to bring them back in the corner complex. I try to hold on till then, but they've pulled out quite a gap in just this final straightaway, and I am properly off the back at this point. So I'm just doing as much as I can, sitting basically at threshold in a full aero tuck, doing the best I can just to come back and trying to just find a wheel, seeing so that I can see if I can recover. Because if I can recover and still be in the group during this race, I can still continue to try to help Nolan, Lars, and Ryan. And I see myself closing up, And you can see I make my critical mistake right here. I try to spike up my power to bridge up, and that does me in. I immediately feel that this power spike that's happening right now in my legs, and at this point I just have nothing left to give in my legs. But I still see that I'm closing it in, closing the group in. So I figure I'll keep trying to just reel them back in slowly by inch by inch. And they do slow down quite a lot coming into this corner complex. So I think, maybe I've got them. Just maybe I've got them. I'm only a couple seconds behind the last wheel coming into this corner complex, but that's it. At this point, coming out of this corner right here that I'm coming into right now, they spike, the field spikes up the power, and I just can't get onto them. And that was basically my race. It was me. I proceeded to chase for about another lap sitting at threshold, but after the next lap, I basically realized that I had spent way too much energy, and I just didn't have the legs to keep trying to chase things back. I wasn't able to race efficiently because of the rain, which is something I have to learn how to do. But also just in general, the result of not being able to race effectively is that I was sitting at a really high heart rate, which means I just couldn't recover sitting when I was like somewhat sitting on wheels. And yeah, basically at this point I sit up, I realize, yeah, my race is over. So I pulled up next to the officials tent and just tell them, yeah, I'm out, guys. And that was my race done. As for Nolan, Lars, and the rest of the race results, the rider from Reno Deva that we saw earlier, he wound up launching a solo breakaway with 3 or 4 laps to go, and he took the dub. As for Nolan and Lars, unfortunately, Nolan got taken out in a crash with 3 laps to go. He managed to still roll in, and Lars wound up having a brake issue that took him out, and he also went down on the last lap. So unfortunately, we wound up going, occupying the last 2 spots, but overall it was still a good race, good experience, and it was a fun crit. If you have a chance to race Cal Aggie or Land Park, I would highly recommend it. It's a wonderful, wonderful course, especially in the dry. It's a little tricky in the rain, but yeah, other than that, have a nice day, and see you guys next time.